Imagine that was your number one priority. You know, just before being right. Number one priority was knowing God. Not your version of God, but the truth of God. The freedom of God. You'll know you know God when you're free. When you are truly free. And your opinions just aren't that important to you. Your opinions are playthings now, not security. Roberta Fillmore wrote, I praise the Christ Spirit that presides in my mind and in my home. Our prayer for the purity and protection of our family must begin at the family table and enter into every detail of our home or our ministry. We must see to it that intelligence and cleanliness of thought and practice are kept inviolate through the recognition of Christ as the head of our house. It doesn't say as Jesus is the head of our house, it says as Christ, the head of our house. There is a difference. Am I still here when I hear when Christ died? No, Christ never died. Christ did not die. Christ is a presence. That's a memory of good. It is the knowing that is. And so I would ask you, does Christ head your household? Does Christ preside at your table? Does Christ drive your car? And would you be willing to know that Christ is driving the other cars too, that freak you out? The ones that are getting up on you and cutting you off. Would you like to know that at least? Maybe if you don't know it yet, would you like to? If God isn't yet the priority of your home, knowing God, would you like it to be? I'm not talking about knowing religion. I'm talking about knowing God. Remember, God's just a word. It's just a silly little word that represents everything. We have chosen the word God. We have agreed to use this word that represents, that describes everything we cannot describe. But when you wake up in the morning, would your priorities, maybe some of you it already is, some others of you, I wonder, is your priority to know God today over anything else? Is your first thought of God? And if it isn't, would you like it to be? That's all. Would you like it to be? Because you see, God's got nothing better to do than wait. God's in no hurry for any of us. Because God's not a person. God's not on a schedule. God does not have a watch because there is no time in God. God is presence. God is love. God is power. God is knowledge itself. God is peace itself. God is wisdom itself. And so you see, there is no pleasing God because there is no displeasing God. However, there is pleasing and displeasing ourselves. Are you ready to please yourself in truth? Are you willing to really give it that next effort? Life can only get better. I'm not going to tell you your circumstances will be different, but I can tell you your thoughts about them will be. Isn't that what we want? We want to know the truth in all circumstances so that we don't have to hate ourselves anymore for what we think is wrong in the world. We don't want to hate our brothers and our sisters. Nobody wants to hate somebody else. Nobody wants to. Just some of us do. I got a couple that I'm having some rough thoughts about in the world, and I work at it, and I work at it, and I work at it. And it's funny, let me keep working on those. But what about the little ones I forget? The ones whose phones go off in a theater. Those brothers and sisters that I forget so quickly. The ones who are driving fearfully. And I forget about those ones. The Christ connection right here, right now. Because to remember that, I will no longer fear them. I don't fear the ones I love, do you? Do you fear the ones you love? Well, doesn't it make more sense to start loving more people? And then there's fewer that I have to be afraid of. Today's talk is called High Praise. High praise. To begin to praise your life. You can start with your body. That's what Myrtle Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, did. She began to praise her body. She began to praise the oxygen that flowed through her body. She praised the cells and the blood that flowed through the cells. She praised all the organs. And she began to get well because she was quite ill. Some of us aren't ill enough yet to really turn to God. You know, some of us aren't unhappy yet enough to really turn it over to God. You know, it hasn't gotten so bad that I'm going to surrender everything to God. Do you have to wait? Are we going to wait till it gets that awful? Some of us, I'm one of them, it got awful enough. It got so awful, it was between choosing life or death that I thought, okay, I've got to give this to God. My understanding of God. And every day, 100 times a day, I surrendered. God, I offer myself to thee. God, I offer myself to thee because I know God's way is better than any way I figured out yet. And my life changed overnight. My life radically changed. I'd be in what had been difficult situations, and suddenly they weren't difficult anymore. I didn't have the word Christ active in my vocabulary at that point. I knew the word Christ, but I still could only associate it with Jesus. I couldn't associate it with myself. But I would have chats with what the God of my understanding, and I would say, I know your way is better, so here you go. I wanted to know God. I wanted to know God so much I quit smoking so I could know God better. And I loved smoking. Oh man, that was fun. And but I knew it was in the way of my prayer. There was a big smoke screen in front of my prayer life, so I became willing. I made friends with those cigarettes, put them down, and my prayer life got even deeper. And my relationships, my resentments got so much lighter. Oh my goodness, it was great. It was really great. My gossip toned down a lot. Any self-abuse toned down a lot. It was fascinating. I started picking up different types of books. I got involved with a different. I went to church. I hadn't gone to church since I was a kid, and I came to Unity, and it's like, oh my goodness, these people. I went on a Unity trip 9 months into Unity. I went to England, and that I would cry every morning as the bus pulled away from the hotel. I'm on this bus. I was 40-something years old, I guess, and there's the minister praying, and we're all praying together on a bus in England. That was amazing. I'd never done anything like that. First of all, I was in England, and I could afford to go there. That was a big shift. And I'm with people, adults who pray together. Nobody smoked on that bus. Nobody. And I would well up every morning because my life had shifted by knowing God more, by living to know God more. So my teachers didn't tell me I couldn't know the world. My teachers told me, don't depend upon the world. Because the world's going to keep changing. The world's going to keep shifting. The universe shape shifts according to our thoughts. But they told me I could have a great time, that this world could become a major party place for me. Not the old type of party place where you tune out, but the new kind of party place where you tune in. And it kept shifting. And a year later, I went with a group to Greece. And a little bit of resentment started kicking in at that point. I started relying on my own thoughts again at that point. And then over the years, I go in and out. And it's only been in the past 2 years that I've become willing to really start seeking to turn my will and my life over to the care of God every day. And I have to do it 100 times again. 100, 1,000 times sometimes. I don't keep track of how many, but it's a lot, and it's frequent. I find I frequently forget. Somebody has a curt tone with me, and I forget. I forget who I am. I forget the very message that I get up here and profess to believe. So 100 times a day, I have to ask to see it differently, the situation, the event, the person, the thing, my thoughts. I have to see it differently so that I can begin to praise my life once again. How many of you praise your life? Start. Praise it, because you don't know the good that is taking place. Give thanks because you don't know. And a couple of people wrote to me a couple of wonderful things. I said, put it in your evidence journal. Last week I talked about the evidence journal that I had been taught about the week before in Texas. Keep an evidence journal of the good taking place in your life. That is answered prayer in a way that you didn't even know you had asked for. But to start keeping track of how the invisible presence keeps shifting. Oh, I had this thought and then I saw this. And I had this thought and I saw this. I had this thought and I saw this. As I turned my will and my life over to the care of the presence of good. Well, listen, I want to read this little thing to you. There are two passages in the Holy Spirit's interpretation. One comes from Luke, chapter 9 here, verse 18, and it says, "You are the Christ, because the Christ of God is within you, and it is Christ that is your true self. This is the health within. This is the light that shines its healing rays throughout your mind, shining away all sickness in every form." So do you get it? It is the Christ in you that shines away sickness in every form. We're not just talking about the physical sickness. We're talking about the mental sickness. We're talking about the spiritual sickness. It is the Christ in you that shines away sickness in every form. Not just some, but every form. I love that. To me, it's a divine promise. And then over here in 1 Corinthians. Where'd it go? Sorry. Oh, yeah. It's chapter 4 of 1 Corinthians. And it's verse 6. It starts, "When you do not forget, and you remember to be an empty shell in service to me," meaning Holy Spirit, capital M me, "it is not, it is." Oh, sorry. When you do not forget, and you remember to be an empty shell in service to me, be grateful to both Spirit and to yourself. In this way, you recognize that we are one. Do not make the mistake of believing that an empty shell is something other than me, meaning Spirit. It is not. It is only Spirit. This is possible because it is an empty shell and no one else. Therefore, do not praise your brother or your sister or yourself apart from Spirit. For the word, as it is, shared. Thank your brother for being a shell. Thank your sister for being a shell. And be grateful that you remembered to put yourself aside. But thank Spirit for the word. And that way you acknowledge what is real for its reality, and you think that which isn't real, and you thank that which isn't real for recognizing its unreality and for getting out of the way of truth. So an empty shell, that's me without my opinions. That an empty shell is me without my lack. It's you without your lack. An empty shell is you, where your personality isn't as important as the presence of God within you. An empty shell is me here available for whatever is next. An empty shell is you there available for whatever is next. And the empty shell, you know what to think. You know what to say and you know what to do. And you won't have to depend upon a limited past in order to do it. Imagine that. Where your past hurts, your past confusion would no longer be the source of information on how to be present right here and right now. The past hurts and confusion would not be your safety zone, your safety place to inform you of how to handle this dangerous thing. As I know God, as I desire Spirit, as I make friends with life, there will be so little to fear. Till finally there is no thing and no one to fear, to put up a wall between so that I am safe. Imagine that your upset meant nothing to me, and my upset meant nothing to you, because the upset is not real. Imagine that we could begin to praise this situation right here, right now, because we don't know what it means. Imagine we only know how it feels. We don't know what it means. But we decide now, it must be good, because the presence of God is here. It is now, and I am in the presence of God. My brother and my sister are in the presence of God. My home, my work, my money is in the presence of God.